Welcome to the Shepherd's Call podcast. We have some guests. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Meddy today because the side of my face is numb. I cracked a molar, so I spent the better part of the afternoon in the dentist chair. So I don't want you to think that I can't speak. But Mike's going to be in charge. We tried to get Brendan because everyone's emailing me or texting me. Let Brendan Hartford talk, but he refuses. He refuses.
Yep, I refuse.
He refuses. So I'm going to let Mike take it
Well, hello,
and introduce
everybody.
our special guest.
He's gonna let the guy that's just getting over a cold who can barely talk himself. But so, anyways, here we go. So again, my name is Mike Meddy, and then we're actually being joined for the first time on these episodes with a couple of special guests. We have Matt Blair. Raise your hand there, Matt, so everybody knows who you are. I guess it kind of says it on your screen. But and then Brendan McCrudden, who's
How's it going?
joined Matt over at the Well and the Resource Center, which is a great institution. And Matt, you want to tell us a little bit about the Well?
Yeah, the Well is a mental health organization for first responders and their families. It's a nonprofit, so we have kind of a social approach where we have basketball and yoga and all sorts of just kind of fun activities. But we also have therapists that work for us, and we provide free services to first responders and their family, and work primarily with the Chicago Police Department, but also with CFD and several different suburban departments as well. So it's about 7 years old and really taking off. Unfortunately, the need is much bigger than we realized. It continues to grow. But at the same time, it's just blessed to be able to lead it alongside my wife. And we just have a great team, growing team, and added Brendan recently. And yeah, we're taking off running.
Well, you guys, I've always heard some, great things about your organization. I know you and I have actually met a few times prior to hooking up on this little project here, and I know we're talking about where you're taking with the Well, and I got to say, it was great news when I heard that Brendan joined your organization. Brendan was a former CPD, right? You retired as commander, correct?
That's right. I was working out of Area 1 Patrol when I retired.
Very nice. So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I just like say I've just retired in November after 25 years with Chicago. I started with the old Chicago Housing Authority Police, actually. So 30 years altogether as a copper. I was out in the suburbs for a couple of years when CHA was getting torn down and redeveloped and all that kind of stuff. And came on with CPD, started in the 11th District. I was kind of lucky enough to work all over the city in different places, one way, shape, or form or another. But Brendan Hartford and I, he was one of our SWAT guys, our SWAT trainers. So it's very good to see him again as well too. So working throughout the city, I was a detective sergeant, ended up being sergeant lieutenant, and I was a captain down in 9 before I was a commander in 20, then back on the south side. So jumped around all over the place, which was a nice chance to meet a lot of people all over the city. Mm-hmm. And just blessed to work with really great people. And Danny McGuire, of course, we worked together back in the day as well too. Very good, very good. But I'd always been on peer support. And actually, my very first, one of the reasons I kind of connected with the Well and Matt's organization is going back years ago. My very first partner, well, he's my field training officer, and then he was, we became partners after that when he wasn't doing field training duties, and he ended up becoming a sergeant. I worked for him for a little while when he was a sergeant. And then, we were different assignments after that, so we weren't always in touch. Well, he committed suicide years ago. And back then I was angry about it and upset. Why would he do something like this? And, he'd come from very humble beginnings and really did well for himself and his family as well, too. And I was just upset and not realizing that there's a lot more going on in the mental health field. So starting to learn a little bit more about it. And that's when I became a peer support member with CPD. Stayed with peer support for a long time. And then when I was kind of hitting my milestones and getting ready to retire from Chicago, Matt and I had been talking. We had met. He's come into the roll calls. He was well recommended, and so many people had good things to say about the organization. So I was happy to have them working with our guys as well too. So he said, "Hey, well, if you're leaving police work, you'd be interested in maybe joining us and trying to help develop this organization." And as he mentioned, there's definitely a need for it. And we saw the beginning of this year was a really bad year to start out. So that was rough. So yeah, I said, well, I've never done this kind of work before as far as being growing an organization and trying to build it up. And Matt said, well, we never did before. we started this either. It was new ground and for them, and they're plowing ahead. And so I'm just gonna try and do my best to get the word out about the organization, let them know about the services that are there, bring more good people on board, just stay connected and supportive and everything we do for first responders and their families. And I think Matt mentioned the first responders and the families, but also retired guys. We don't want retired officers, fire, you name it, whole first responder spectrum there. We don't want them to feel left out or anything like that, or hey, you're no longer an active member, but hey, you've been serving this whole time. We still want all those folks and their families part of the to still stay connected and still feel that their service mattered and they're not forgotten as well too.
And that last bit that you just brought up about the connection, and it's hard if you've been lucky enough to not have gotten into any major trouble or not any, haven't gotten catastrophically injured, in the line of duty. You were blessed with not ever feeling alone. Because while you're at work, you're going to work. The brotherhood is there and whatnot. But as most of us understand, when you're at work, the job kind of takes your life, right? It really does engulf a lot of everything that you do. You spend a lot of time, more time with your work family than your real family sometimes. And it's not until, that retirement, where you realize, hey, the guys don't call me anymore, or you got hurt, or you're on a long-term suspension, or you get let go. You don't realize just how disconnected that can actually feel. So it's one thing that we're trying to do here is let people realize. It's this is, you have to find other connections other than the job, outside of work, because for whatever reason, work is no longer there, and it will not be there forever, right? You definitely have a finite amount of time that you're going to be working for CPD. So, or CFD or wherever else you're working as law enforcement. And you know what, you gotta start preparing for that way before, that last day of work when you go in and you turn in your stuff. And in talking with officers that have gone through traumatic events and dealing with mental health issues, that's one of the biggest complaints they have, is that fear, that feeling that they've been forgotten. And and having been on both sides of that spectrum, I've tried to comfort them. And it's not that their teammates or the people they work with are forgetting them. It try to remind them of, hey, remember when you were working and somebody else on the team got hurt? Like, did you ever call them? Did it's not personal. It's just life is continuing on for everybody else like it's normal. Unfortunately, you've been removed from the situation for a little bit. It's temporary or could be extended, but it's that lack of knowing what to do when those moments happen. And if you don't have anything outside of the job, where do you go? I tell everybody, 2.5 years ago when I started hanging out with Danny McGuire, who knew that was going to be my, such a huge,
Mistake.
crutch for me, right? I know nobody claims that a lot. I don't see anybody really claiming that one, right? Danny turned my life around, but you know what? It was him, keep trying to get me into the Mary Seat of Wisdom Bible study, when I started doing that, and then that brought me into going back to church, and that it just kind of evolved my faith throughout the last couple of years, and it's made me so much better person, and not just spiritually, physically, mentally, but just as a whole. And it's one of those things where now those tough issues don't seem to be that big of a deal anymore, because there's always something else that I know that I have that support, and knowing that God is there for me, knowing that my faith is there for me. It really is something.
I'm gonna try to talk here. And Mike, it's okay for you to say that I'm your hero. I'm okay with it.
You
It's
are
okay.
the wind beneath
So-
my wings,
Okay,
Danny.
no problem. I have no problem accepting that. It's cool. So I when you deal with people that are going through this, like, had friends catastrophically injured or, whatever. And You're right, Mike. It's the same story. Like, I feel forgotten. One guy I know was in a bad accident, and he said the mayor gave me his card and the superintendent gave me his card and said, if I need anything, give him a call. Right. He goes, but when I called them, they didn't answer, and I'm like, yeah, well, they're busy, right? They're busy people. He goes, yeah, but everyone was there when I was leaving the hospital after 3 weeks in the wheelchair. Everyone's there to take a picture. I go, of course. So I would always tell people, I challenge people, be the person that's there 6 months later, because everyone's there always on the front end, because they all want to be part of the photo op or being part of the process of recovery. But then 6 months later, no one's there. When I went off the job, it was hard to transition, and into a different world. Brendan's the one who recommended the book Excommunicated Warrior, right? Brendan Hartford. Recommended that book to me, and I read it, and it really changed the way I, had a perspective on things, because it changed a lot.
So, Matt, in what you've been doing, I mean, do you see the same thing? Do you see a lot of the same issues?
Yeah, it's our donor base asks me all the time, because we're supported by private individuals and foundations, and our donor base asks me a lot, like, is it all trauma work? Is it all, and I say the thing we combat against the most in our therapy setting and everything is isolation. And it's isolation from one, whether it's, I'm retired, I'm off the job, to speaking to what you guys are referring to, or and I'm kind of out of the community. My identity was so wrapped up in wearing that star and wearing that uniform that once I have to hang it up, like, what's next? There's that feeling is isolating, right? That nobody's seen or dealt with the things that I've had to deal with or go through. So people won't the outside world won't really understand. Or, my spouse doesn't understand it. And now, now we're home all the time. Like, me and Brendan make time is some of these marriages work because the people are out of the house, like it's, my firefighters say they work because for 24 hours at a time, somebody's gone, those are things that we see and deal with. Yeah. The job plays a role in it, but ultimately we're still human beings, and the main issues that we see are normal people problems.
Yep.
The job compounds it and makes it that much more challenging and that much more difficult. So yeah, we see a lot of isolation is the thing that we're trying to fight against majority of the time.
It's tough, for sure.
A lot of times, Matt, one of the things I deal with as a therapist is the communication issues. And then what happens is, priorities. There's always like a set of priorities. Like, for an example, I would say, hey, students at the college, when I'm teaching a wellness class, like, what are your priorities? Mine is God, my family, and then work. And then in my family, my wife is first, right? So what happens is you hear about this police couple, they're getting divorced after 33 years of marriage, right? And you're like, well, what happened? The kids grew up, now they got nothing in common.
Right.
Because
Right.
they didn't put each other first. They put all the kids' stuff first.
Right.
And then, it got in the way. So it's pretty, pretty deep stuff, I mean, and it's a lot of cumulative stress and trauma. And that isolation is a huge part of that. I'm glad you brought that up. It's kind of flipped the switch for me there. I appreciate that.
It's even the piece that you said about be the person that's there 6 months later. Me and Brendan were just having a conversation about this, about funerals and the different wakes and the different, like, it's overwhelming how many there are, whether job related or not, that you end up attending, to the point where they blur together. Like, you can't remember whose funeral it was or the name of the person, and it's just like, I remember being at Malik funeral homes 7 times in 8 weeks, like it was something insane like that, where I was just constantly there. And, what we try to do as an organization, to your point, Danny, we try to, everybody that's at the funeral home that day, and everybody's life was impacted by that individual that passed away. Right. But all of our lives are going to go back to normal at some point, but that family's life is forever changed. Right. So it's, trying to be there for them. Because again, organizationally, we want to be there 6 months, 10 months, the long term. So a lot of times our team and our staff will try to do in those moments is like, I've handed business cards to widows and say, hey, listen, you're not going to remember me. You're not going to remember this moment. You're not going to remember, but this is a number that I want you to hang on to that you might need 10 months from now, that you might need down the road. And then try to look for those connections to kind of come back to those feelings. Cause it's a real difficult and challenging part of this work is when and just anybody that's living life together, that's living life with a common, community. When you're living life with people, heartache is part of it. But making sure that people stay engaged in the community, is a challenge for sure.
I wanted to ask Brendan McCrudden a question, not Brendan Hartford. I know all of you are waiting on pins and needles for Brendan Hartford to say something. So, right, he's locking it up and throwing away the key. So you and I worked together in SOS, we're HPT together, right? And then all that other stuff after that. And you moved up the ladder. And as you went up, did your perspective change when it came to empathy, when it came to faith and trying to work with people at every different level you went? Did it become more difficult? Was it easier? What would you say? Because I think that's an important key to this, is when you have somebody that it's like the modeling theory, right? With Albert Bandura, where he said, hey, the social learning theory, with the Bobo doll, if you perceive someone that is a greater authority of you doing something, you're going to follow, right? So did it get harder or easier?
I think as it expanded, because when you're like you're working with your partner first, right? You're working with your partner. Now you're maybe a member on a team, or the bigger unit as SOS. But then when you become a sergeant, well, now you're responsible for those folks as well too. So you get to know them, but you're also responsible for them and what's happening with their lives outside of the job as well too, because that impacts how they come to work and what they do at work, or something, an emergency happens and they got to leave because of something. And now then you move up a little bit. I was lucky enough to fool them to promote me a few times, however that worked out. But now as a lieutenant, now you got, and that's expanded, and I was a tech lieutenant. We had 5 teams at one point, right? So, you have all those folks as well too. In the district on the watches, and then in the detective division too, you've got all these different stuff. You're trying to look out for your folks and the personalities and juggle all that as well too, while still trying to catch bad guys and trying to help good people and things like that. So I think it did increase the empathy you have, because you start learning about more problems and more issues that officers might have: a sick child, an elderly parent, marital difficulties, relationship difficulties, drinking problems, maybe a little too gambling, all these different things. You start learning about them, and you're trying to help get move people in the right direction, right? And then as it gets bigger and bigger, now a district and now an area, so there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts involved. But I think as long as you keep that empathy at heart, that you say, hey, I'm here to try and help people, where the job's going to get done, the mission's going to get accomplished one way or another, or however the investigation is going to continue to progress or move forward. But in the meantime, we got to take care of the folks. We got to make sure that they're doing okay, they're coming to work, or if we need to send them home early or something like that, because what's going on off duty or something like that, just trying to keep them at the forefront. It's easy to say people first, take care of your people and family first and all that kind of stuff, and then sometimes it can get hard during the moments of the mission. But then there's what's happening after work too, as well too. There's a chance, like you talk, reaching out to someone who was injured before, and sometimes it is hard to remember. You're like, oh yeah, I should check in on this person, just see how they're doing and stuff like that. So, and I know they do appreciate it, right? But it's sometimes we just have to remind ourselves, or maybe remind others to continue to care. And as things get bigger, still keep caring, but then you still got to care about the little things closer to home as well too. Like we talked about family. The more you give, the more time you spend on the job, where does that take away from your family, your friends, and stuff like that? So you got to try and remember to keep that going as well too. So yeah, there's a lot of juggling as the different teams and units and stuff like that. But I think that it just gave me a chance to meet more people and get to know them on a different level. And that was one of the best rewards of the job, actually, moving in working in different units in different parts of the city and stuff like that. So I was very lucky to do that.
That's great. Great stuff. Mike, I didn't mean to jump in. I'm giving your voice a break here. I wanted to talk to the Reverend Matt Blair, if I could. So, I'm glad that we're having this dialogue because this week's gospel for Luke coming up. Jesus talks about, splinters in your brother's eye when you remove the wooden beam from yours first. What's all that got to do with this? What we're talking about? What do you think? You think it has anything to do with it?
Yeah, the self-awareness is a vital tool when it comes to, I mean, everybody, but at the same time, especially in the first responder community. I can't tell you how many roll call rooms that I've been in that I've seen what I call, I stole it from a mentor of mine, an EGR, an extra grace required person. Every room has that, right? Has that person that takes a little extra grace. But I've been in the roll call rooms where everybody knows who that EGR is, except for the EGR themselves, right? They do not get it. And they don't realize because either the emotional intelligence isn't there or whatever. So this self-awareness thing is so important because you get into different situations or different things in the job. Understanding how you're perceived by your peers is important, but at the same time, you have to be able to. My wife says it, and it gets that Jesus talks about it, so I think she might have taken it from him. But connect before you correct. Like that whole aspect of really getting to know someone before you try to correct a behavior or something. That stuff is extremely relevant when it comes to the first responder community, because we pay attention to leaders or bosses that just like seemingly do not care about us as individuals, but they're going to tell us how to do something, right? No, I'm gonna listen to the Brendan McCruddens of the world, that a guy that I know has my best interest in mind and is caring for me and is caring for my family and is doing all the things that he just said. Hey, does this person need to come home, go home early because they have that going situation? If that boss tells me to, go through that door, I'm going to listen. But the one that I don't necessarily trust because they're not showing me any empathy or don't care for me as a human being, I'm going to be a little more hesitant and hesitant.
But you said it. You said trust, right?
Right.
That's the key factor, right? I think it was Colin Powell that said he learned in infantry school from a sergeant in infantry school when he was a young lieutenant, and he said the guy told him, "You'll know you're a good leader if people follow you, if only out of curiosity, and they have to trust you. Right. If they trust you, they'll follow you into the darkest night." So he said the most important part of leadership is trust and establishing that trust. People are not going to follow someone they don't trust, right? Jesus went up to all these people, and Mike, we talk about this, Brendan Hartford, we talk about this all the time, men's group. They weren't like the upper crust people of society. He wasn't going after the rich people. He's going after the jerk offs, right?
Right.
Sorry. He was, right? He was going after those guys and converting them into these, they became saints, Interesting, Reverend Matt. That was great. That was perfect to where I want to segue. And just so everyone knows that's watching or listening, we really didn't talk about this beforehand. That's how great this dynamic is. Great this dynamic is, right? So, hey, Brendan Hartford, everyone's going to get their chance right now to hear from Brendan Hartford. Could you read the gospel for us, Brendan, from Luke?
Dan.
Yeah,
You're just determined.
I'm even going to take my hat off, Brendan, for you, buddy.
All right. First of all, I got to increase the size of the font so I can see it.
Yeah. Well,
there we go. We're going to go up to about 200. There we go. That's better.
You're older than me, so I can say it.
Yeah. All right. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
All right. We're reading from Luke chapter 6, verses 39 through 45. Jesus told his disciples a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? No disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, Brother, let me remove that splinter in your eye, when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own eye? You hypocrite, remove the wooden beam from your eye first. Then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. A good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit. For every tree is known by its own fruit. For people do not pick figs from thorn bushes, nor do they gather grapes from brambles. A good person out of the store of goodness in his heart produces good, but an evil person out of a store of evil produces evil. For from the fullness of the heart the mouth speaks. Word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Amen.
Be to God.
What a fascinating parable, right? About
Well,
judging others before
to me,
we
that means,
look at ourselves.
square your own shit away before you start poking at other people.
Mm. Wouldn't that be nice? That happens in the roll call rooms all the time, doesn't it? Brendan, Mike, Matt,
Well,
you've been to roll call rooms, right?
as Matt was talking about the EGR, right? Is that what it was?
Yep.
Extra grace required.
Extra something required. Yeah, grace. And so it's interesting because when you yourself are down like that, and you're the grouch, right? Um, it's you see those kind of people, and you see them doing exactly what we're talking about in this parable, which is pointing out everybody else's deficiencies and all their problems, and it's almost a defense mechanism sort of a thing, right? And so I know I'm going through a bunch of crap, so I'm going to put crap on somebody else, so I feel better about what I'm going through. And it's like, and it's the same thing, Danny, when you're talking about trying to help somebody. And I had this happen once, talking to a supervisor about an officer with an alcohol issue, and how do we make a breakthrough, and how do we get this officer to really want to go get help? And the lieutenant told me, he goes, you know what? He's like, you've known me a while. He's like, I'm not the person to go and get that person to go get help. I mean, they basically told me, hey, listen, I still got that plank in my eye. I can't go tell him to get it out of his, and I respected that, I really did, because it's, he saw that he wasn't the right fit to be the one trying to urge somebody to go to get treatment, right? So it was it helped out, but you know what? Not everybody sees that. Not everybody can look in the mirror and make those kind of judgment calls. And yes, in roll call rooms, you get that a lot, right? So
Everyone's always trying to take the heat off themselves, right?
yeah.
So I remember Brendan remember the mobile command post?
Mhm.
So me and
Yeah.
Glenn, God rest his soul, Glenn Osberg, my partner who passed away. We got these brand new sort cars, right? And Lieutenant Efred Bossy was insane about the sort cars, and someone like scratched theirs, right? And me and Glenn, they were beside themselves. I got to tell Bossy, he's gonna, oh God, he's gonna scream at me. He's gonna call me a dumbass, all this stuff. And Glenn says to him, hey, chill out, man. Around here, someone messes up every like 5 minutes. So someone will take, and now, mind you, the same time it's beep, beep, beep. Someone's backing in a mobile command bus, right? And Glenn's telling them, we're trying to calm these guys down. And then bam, the whole side of the mobile command bus, bricks fall. And Glenn goes, look, the heat's off of you right now. Right? Like it's done. It's a done deal. So like around, in our world, when you try to talk about faith to somebody, they always have this thing like, why I can't, there's no way. If I walk into church, I even joke with Mike, when you walk into church, you touch the holy water, it's going to turn black, like people feel that way about themselves, and it's like self-deprecating behavior, but in actuality, none of that is true, right?
Right.
There's always salvation.
Yeah, well, it's that first step though. You got to get there, right? I mean, that first step is the hardest.
Well, that's
You
why
have,
places
it
like
is all that doubt,
that's like places like the well are so important.
Well,
right?
and it's funny that you made the holy water joke, because the well started at the branch community church, right? So we used to have our meetings and stuff, our group meeting stuff, and we'd be inside the church gym and whatever. And I'll never forget, I've had so many coppers walk into the building, like step over the threshold and over the threshold, right back. And it was like, oh, I didn't get struck by lightning, like that. It showed me like people that don't understand the gospel and don't understand the full message of Christ see it as this scary thing rather than this inviting open arm thing that it's supposed to be. Now, who caused it to be that way? Was that Jesus? I don't think so. You know what I mean?
Man, us.
The log in the eye is what caused that to be that way, right? That's why people are worried about the holy water turning black or being struck down by lightning by going into it. People made that. That wasn't Jesus doing that.
Absolutely.
Well, Dan, you and I have had several conversations about how we were raised. Yeah, knock it off, Mike. On how Catholicism, probably Christianity as a whole, was taught different when we were growing up than it is now.
Yeah.
And, I've experienced a couple people of work that have told me stories about their family dynamic around their religion. And I'm like, that's not what it truly is. I mean, and honestly, it's completely different than what the story you're telling me is. It's more, it's not this, vindictive, punishing religion, and I think thankfully, I think that's changing, but I think that is a block to a lot of guys, girls from our communities coming back to the church.
Well, you always revert back to the vineyard owner, right? The parable of Jesus. Everyone's working at different times. They all come in, they all get paid the same, right? So no matter when you come in, salvation is always there, right? And that's what you tell people. Like, you're thinking you've done these incredible sins, and it's just not true. It's like the forgiveness is there. Just don't do that shit again.
I was talking to
Or try not to, right? Do your best.
Right.
Scout's honor.
So I was talking to a female officer not too long ago, well, a little while ago, but we were talking about church, and it came up, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not going there. That place is full of hypocrites. That place is full." She mentioned a couple times, "That's full of hypocrites. I know this one and this person there, and it's all full of hypocrites." And well, maybe, but I don't know. What popped into my mind. I had read it many, many years ago, and I said, "Well, the church is not a sanctuary. It's not a museum for saints. It's a hospital for sinners." So yeah, you might think they're hypocrites, but they're going to church, and hopefully they're trying to make those steps, and then it's not just showing up to show up, but hopefully those folks that are there they're trying to change, and maybe they're on a path to getting better, improving, or whatever you want to call it, just reconnecting. And so she thought about that. And she's like, "Well, yeah, maybe." And I said, "Well, maybe you should go sometime." I said, I go to church, and there's times people say you're a hypocrite, because again, we don't always live perfect lives, right? But I'm going there, and we're making the effort. And so I was trying to explain that to her, and hopefully it seemed like it resonated a little bit. But I think that is out there, that you're a hypocrite, in the different forms. But it's not like, hey, we go there because we're perfect. We go there because we're trying to get better.
Right.
Well, not only that, Brent, it's that goes to the why are you going there? Are you going there, you're not going there for the supposed hypocrites that you believe in. They very well may be hypocrites. You're going there for you and to grow closer to God. Right. So, I mean, what's your why?
See, to go further into that, Brendan, like my first, I mean, I'm looking back, going back 2.5 years, right? When Danny was nagging me to go to Saturday mornings, it's like, well, what am I going to do there? Right. Like,
he can be a nag too.
It was being afraid of not knowing what everybody else knew, right? Like going in there, and it was a little intimidating. Some of those guys really know the Bible, like forwards and backwards. I mean, it's really cool. And I love what I've learned so far, but and then starting to step inside the church again and going through that and having that Saturday morning first and going into church made church more, like it just I understood it more, right? It wasn't just going in there and going through the motions. It was like, oh, I actually know what's going on, and I'm actually understanding the word more. And it was the big thing, I think, And, Brendan, going back to, that, well, there are hypocrites in there. And it's like, well, that's an excuse, right? I think that's maybe a little bit of her hesitation because for me, you can't start getting back into your faith until you're ready to start judging yourself.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can't, I can lie to myself all day long. The minute I start talking to God, though, there's no more lying, right? You can't sit there and say, "Hey, God, it's me," and then go, "Hey, I've been a really, really good boy today. Like I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
I had no bad thoughts, no nothing." And because I mean, you just can't. So I think that's the little bit. And going back to what you said, Danny, about it's the forgiveness is there. Okay, it's so Tim got me, and I listened to Father Mike Schmidt thing that he did about will you let him love you, basically, right? And it's that same message. It's not about, hey, your sins have already been forgiven. You're loved. You just have to accept it. And I think that's something for people trying to get back into their faith is, just it's not about, don't feel guilty, don't feel like ashamed, just accept it and just work on the acceptance part of it. God loves you. Jesus loves you. They've never left you. And it's just your own inhibitions, your own, scare tactics that are keeping you from accepting it. And I think, it's that, because once you do it, we've
Fear.
talked about this several times in the last couple episodes about that hope, right? Because once you realize that that's there, I mean, there's that it's endless hope. There is no more, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? It doesn't matter.
You
God's got it. My faith has got it. And then let's just work on what we got to do.
you
What do we got
bring
to
up
do about it?
you bring up a great point, but I want to kind of push back on something and ask Matt and Brendan Mick their opinion on this. Now, let's say you get somebody to, you finally get somebody to say, "Hey, okay, I'm going to submit, right? I'm going to surrender. I'm going to surrender myself to God." But then the other people come to them, you know, um, I like to call them the flying monkeys, right? They come after them, right? And they're like, "Hey, man, what do you think you're better than us now, Mr. Holy Guy? 3 weeks ago you were drinking a case of beer and trying to pick up a hooker on Madison Street. Now look at you.
That was
Now
4
you're
weeks
all
ago.
full of God, right?
4 weeks ago.
Sorry about that. Four weeks ago, right? Like now all of a sudden you're Mr. Holy. What do you tell somebody like that who's challenged? Like, well, they're right. There's no saving me. There's no hope, right? What do you tell somebody like that?
There's no use, to Mike's point, trying to deny past sins, right? There's no use to it's not worth it. But at the same time, yeah, I can be forgiven from those things, and I can move forward. It's, you guys were talking, and this still relates. My mentor, is the same guy who stole the EGR thing, so I got a lot of like quotable things from him. He used to say, he's the lead pastor of our church, right? He used to say, "I'm just one beggar trying to teach another beggar how to find bread." Right? Like that's, as a leader. And that the point is, yeah, I'm still going to screw up. I'm still going to mess up, but I'm loved anyway. Like that, like what Mike said, allowing him to love me in spite of myself. That's the beauty of the gospel, is what Jesus is saying is, I love you in spite of everything that you've ever done and everything you're going to do. It's a phrase that I say to my children, probably not often enough, but I want to, that I need to say more, and it's straight from Christ. There's nothing that they can do that's going to make me love them anymore. And there's nothing they can do that's going to make me love them any less.
Mhm.
Jesus looks at us the same way.
Yeah.
And once you accept that, to, again, Mike's point about like, man, like, well, it's not that, it just makes you want to live differently. You're living for your Father in heaven, and living that way is like the long game and the change and the progression over time.
Right.
4 weeks is nothing's gonna change overnight. And if it does change overnight, then I got concerns, because then how long can that's everybody's path is like this. It's hard to be steady.
Kind of go back to an analogy about this job, right? In law enforcement, the minute you think you know everything, something's gonna let you know you don't. And and Matt, to your point about, it's not that you're better than anybody else. And Danny, I had guys, hey man, why don't you come out, hang out at the club, this and that, and I love those guys, with all my heart. It's just, I just tell them I'm not in that same place. I'm not that same person I was. And right now I've removed myself from those kind of situations because I don't do well in those situations.
No, it's like,
So,
and not to discredit bagpipe band, but that's what it is for me. Being in I've been in bagpipe band my whole adult life, even
right.
late teen life, and going back to that for me is it would be toxic. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's the same thing. I don't think I'm better than you. I just, I can't be here.
But it's the priorities. It's
Right.
it's that, like you said God, family, job, right, and anything else. I think
Right.
for a lot of our officers, that job comes first.
Yeah.
And then from there, if they don't have any faith, then it's maybe family, maybe it's the club, maybe it's the teams that you're on, whatever, and making whatever excuse not to be there. A lot of guys, use that work. Like we were talking about somebody, I don't know if it was you, Brendan, or Matt, talking about, you get that, you get to that, retirement spot, and then you go, oh man, I don't even know who my wife is. I don't even know who my husband is, because I've been gone for 90% of our relationship, while I was working. And how do you start all over after that? I mean, it's amazing how many retirees we find out end up getting divorces, within the first couple of years, realizing that they don't know each other and that they don't like each other because of that separation for that long.
Brendan McCrudden, if let's say as a high-ranking guy or just throughout your career, someone came to you and brought something up like that, like, hey, I'm trying to make a change here. And these guys, they're all over me about hanging out, or doing the thing. Back in our day, it was like Ira's, right, or something. We're gonna go to Ira's, right? Hanging out with the guys, or what was that joint, Dugan's, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Back in our day, it was different. Now I think the coppers are smarter now. Like you ask a copper, hey, you want to go out for some drinks? They say, I'm gonna go run 6 miles. Why would you want to run to the bar? I got a car, I'll drive you, right? Like, what's wrong with you? So.
Right.
I think people are a little different now, but what would you say to a a young guy or gal on the job? They come to you, they're like, I'm trying to redirect myself, reprioritize and stuff, and I keep getting sucked into these situations where I feel like I can't get out. What would you tell that person?
I think having some of those other outlets might be one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, you guys are going to do this, but I've got this going on. I'm doing some, and I'm doing some with the family, and like hopefully everyone can understand that. And if it doesn't have to be with my kids, it could be I'm doing something with my cousins. I'm going out with my aunt, uncle, or find that, if it doesn't exist, I would tell that officer, find something out there, have these other things to do that you have a reason. So it's not like, well, I'm just going to go home and watch, pet my cat and watch TV or something like that. That hey, you have a reason.
That sounds a little weird, though. Anyway,
Right.
that sounds a little.
Don't say that, Brendan. Yeah.
Well, I'm a dog person, so that's why when I thought weird stuff, I was like, cats. No. Cats are fine. Cats are fine. But
Yeah.
but it's not like I'm just like shunning you guys, or anything like that, because I don't want to, want to change that lifestyle. I have other things, like finding those other things to do, so you have a reason to not go there. And it doesn't have to be, slagging them out. You guys are wrong and you guys are bad or anything like that. But
Correct.
then
Right.
if you're making that break and it's something positive, hopefully you're picking something positive, hey, getting up early to go fishing in the morning, or take my mom to doctor's appointment, all different things that you can do. I'm spending time with my mom or a parent because, hey, I realize that, maybe there's a a chronic illness and I want to spend some good time with that person. So if you have some positive, I think no one's going to fault. Well, hopefully nobody would fault you for that. And then maybe that will draw some other folks to think about, oh yeah, maybe I won't go, to the bar every night or something along those lines, go out gambling or whatever. I'll, one of these nights I am going to go spend a little more time with other family or friends or something like that. And you never know, that could be a draw, that one person who then becomes a leader, right? We're talking a little bit about leaders and, the unofficial leaders as opposed to, someone by rank or title or something like that. But hey, that person had the courage to do this, and maybe someone else. There's always the folks who are kind of, hey, I'll go with the flow, I'll go with the crowd. But if someone breaks away from that, well, now there's a new flow to go to, and that might draw some other folks out there. So, and then if it really came down to it, then I said, well, if you really can't feel like you can break away from these folks, then maybe it's time to change the work situation. Maybe you need to be on a different watch, a different, see about getting if it's really something overwhelming, then maybe it's a different district. The nice thing about Chicago, there are some different districts to go to, and you can, some are very easy to get into, right? There's trouble getting into some districts, right? Suburban departments or other agencies might be a little more, hey, there's only one station, there's only one place to go, that sort of thing. But I think with making those moves that can get you going in the right direction, as long as you're moving towards some positive, right? And then maybe some other folks will follow along like that too. That would be my advice.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, I haven't had, I've had guys, hey man, you should come around more and blah blah blah. And I was like, I just tell them, why I made the choices I made. And I don't, they've all been good about it. They haven't really given me any crap, especially about the drinking. Oh, dude, if you're not drinking, it's cool. You don't have to drink. Nobody's gonna give you, they're, but it was, for me, it's more than just the drinking part, but it's one of those things that, go back to the gospel about, not being able to go tell somebody about the plank in their eye if you're not going to take the one out of your own. And it's one of those things like, hey, I'm just making some better choices in my life, reprioritizing what really matters the most to me and to my family. And at that point, there's really no arguments. Like they can't really argue. Oh, you're choosing your family over. Like,
Yeah, right.
What are they gonna say?
Well, some people might. You never know.
Like, and if they are gonna make that argument, you go, I really think I'm making the right decision here. I mean, you're gonna give me a hard time for wanting to spend time with my wife and my children.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like, sorry.
So
I should have made this decision years and years and years ago.
For our last few minutes before we conclude, time has flown by. Matt and Brendan McCrudden, thank God you're here, because if I just had to deal with Mike and Brendan, I'd be looking at my watch all day like, oh my God, this is dragging on, but it's flown by. So I want to share this picture that, I used an AI tool because I heard a story and I wrote the story in the AI tool. And I said, hey, paint me a picture of what this might look like. And it did. And the story is about a police officer who always patrolled the same area. He was always patrolling the same area for years. And one winter evening, he noticed this homeless man shivering on a bench. And, the man had been there before. He was there for a while, but the police officer just passed him by, shake his head. And, so this is self-inflicted, like this is one of those guys who made poor life choices and whatever. That's his problem. But one night, the officer had remembered what Jesus had said about removing the wooden beam from his own eye first, right? So he realized that he had been quick to judge and slow to help. So one night he decided that he would, instead of yelling at the guy about getting off the bench or whatever, he'd sit down beside him, get him a hot cup of coffee and some food and listen to his story. And he realized that this man had a unique story, that he was a veteran, he served his country, that he had a good job. He had once been a first responder, and then he lost his job due to a tragic event, and his life had taken a dark turn. He turned to alcohol and other things, and no one had really shown him mercy or helped him, right? And at that point in time, the officer felt that his approach to what justice looked like now included a little bit of mercy, and don't judge a book by its cover, removing that beam from his eye. So what say you all about that story? Interesting, huh?
It definitely is, and it's one of the traps that we can all often fall into the in the police world, and in this case, it's a guy, a homeless guy sort of thing. But we do it too with like some of the folks on the criminal side, the criminal element, where these guys, thug life and gangsters and stuff like that. But then sometimes when you look at it, it's like, well, this is a kid who grew up in that, the dad, the uncle, the cousins, some of these gang ties are entrenched, and here's someone who just had they been grew up in a different neighborhood or 6 blocks away, or something like that, none of that lifestyle would have happened. So we sometimes have to remember that as well too. And is there any way to at some point try and get some of these, especially these younger kids, away from that? Is there a way that we can, as police officers, again, like being professional and looking sharp and acting with justice, with mercy, and some things like that? Is that a way that might, in some small way, and just even if it's only a couple people in the course of a career, that you might have that impact on, that maybe they say, hey, I got to get out of this lifestyle, then it's worth it for us to try and do that. But it's very easy to just, these guys are, gangsters and thugs and scumbags, right? Because
Right.
sometimes
Sure.
that's what their actions are at that moment. But it's like, well, what led to those actions?
Right.
Because everybody around them was just, hey, this is negative and this is what we do, and well, okay, that's what everyone around me does, so I'm going to do that too. That lifestyle. And prison is a yeah, of course I'm going to go to prison. And then the graveyard, that sort of deal, right? So it's a good reminder for us to look again. I like that term, a little bit of justice with mercy, right?
Mhm.
I like that.
This is a reminder of like the impact that this uniform can have, right? So there's a statistic that we share at the well all the time, and we share it for different environments. And I've shared it in some of our galas and our events and different things. So the statistic is the average human being experiences 3 to 4, and it's either 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. It's written someplace in this office. I should know where it is. But 3 to 4 traumatic experiences in their lifetime. 2 to 3, so 1 to 2, 1 to 2. Okay, thanks. 1 to 2 traumatic experiences in their lifetime. Where the average first responder will experience 178 in their career, right? In a 30-year career. Now, Chicago guys, amongst the 4 of you, there's been definitely more than 178. There's been probably thousands and thousands, right? So your experiences with people are on their absolute worst moments, worst days, right? And if you could leave some sort of positive impact on them, think of the ripple effect that can have on the rest of the world. That you're encountering so many. If you can be the hands and feet of Christ in those moments, and in the darkest of dark, bring an ounce of light, think of the ripple effect that it has on the world. And this story, and Mike, one of the other podcasts, you shared the story about, it's kind of funny to me, but the guy that had crack on him in the shoe or whatever, and you were like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a worthy amount, and you're kind of like, all right, see you later, have a good day. Like, you could have made that guy's day a whole lot worse.
Again, the statute of limitations on that man are over with. Mike inventoried that crack cocaine. The inventory is lost in the system somewhere. Before we speak any further, Hope is listening. Thank you.
But the idea is the impact on that guy's perception of what he had as of who the police are, right? I guarantee changed in that moment, right? I guarantee changed in that moment. And you have the power to change people's perspective,
Right.
in every interaction. And in the same way, we have the power to do that as changing the reputation of the church. Like I said earlier, the reason people feel judged or that the building is filled with hypocrites has nothing to do with Jesus, it has everything to do with the people that are inside it, making people feel that way. So we have a reputation as followers of Christ that isn't necessarily the best right now. So every interaction we have with people has the power to change that reputation. So it's something to think about, just, the way you interact with people on a daily basis, whether in the uniform or not, has a lot of power to have an amazing ripple effect on what it is to be called a Christian.
Absolutely.
It's funny, at the end of the story, actually, it's written in the story that I kind of paraphrased. It said the officer still upheld the law, but now his actions bore the fruit of compassion.
Absolutely. And you know, like I say this all the time, Danny, you've heard me, Brendan, you know, it was, I loved when you would bring somebody to lock up with some crazy charges on there. So a lot of felonies, right? And then when the lockup keeper takes them, the guy turns to, all right, Mike, see you later.
Better
Like
hear your-
lockup keeper's like, wait, what?
right,
Like,
right.
this guy's looking like he's going to prison for quite some time. Like, why is he being so nice to the guy that just brought him in here? And it's that part right there, right? He still upheld the law, but now he bears fruit of compassion. And it's this guy, this officer in this story, he's sitting down and talking with the homeless guy instead of just driving by again, and showing that little bit of compassion changes both of their lives at the same time. And that funny story about the guy in this traffic stop was I think it was somewhere around like 3 months after I came back from Iowa, so it was like I was very shaky on who I was going to be at that time. I was still working on a lot of my issues that was happening post Iowa, and so it was kind of interesting, and I had a lot of those moments, and not necessarily just like that, but it was, you know, it, it wasn't personal anymore. It wasn't that, I'm a cop, they're the bad guys kind of an attitude anymore. It was, what, like, all right, it's just a job. I didn't take it personal. And at the end of the day, if the guy was cool, well, then you know what? I was cool to them. Why wouldn't I be, right? I mean, they're a human being. I'm a human being. Treat them just like I would want to be treated. So it's
Yeah,
pretty
that
neat.
was a hard time for you, Mike. You were still heating your bologna sandwiches on a radiator for quite some time at house. I know.
I tell you, listen, somebody not too long ago made fun of me the way I eat. Okay. Apparently, I had both elbows on the table like I was guarding my food tray in the mess hall. And I'm like, when they said that to me, I looked at myself. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
There are some things you just it's so ingrained in you. It's weird.
Oh God. Well, we've reached the end of our show. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Brendan, for coming on. And in the future, please, you're welcome to join us again. Dialogue's great. The well, Matt, please tell us one more time about the well so everyone knows how to get a hold of you guys and if they ever need anything.
Yeah. Encourage you to visit the Well RC, like Resource Center.org, to kind of engage a little bit more and check out our website and kind of see the services. But again, first responders and their families. And like Brendan said, once you're a first responder, you're always a first responder in our eyes, or you're always part of the family. And we try to create a family atmosphere here where, mental health doesn't carry the same, we try to create so it doesn't carry the same stereotypes that it often does in the first responder community. And we try to build trust and rapport and all those things. Roll call is a big part of that. And visiting and being a consistent presence. The way we build trust is through time and consistency. So we try to be as consistent as possible. But organizationally, we're just growing pretty rapidly because of the support from individuals and the financial support. So all the first responders listening, you should hear that you should be encouraged by that there's so many people out there that are supporting, putting their money where their mouth is, and supporting you and investing back in our organization as a way to invest back in the city. Because our view is they believe, like we do, that if we have healthy first responders, then we have healthy cities and healthy communities. And so yeah, we're trying to do that and trying to grow on the north side now. 6160 West Higgins is our location. So we always say the roll call rooms, you see the light on up on the second floor, that means you're welcome. Come stop on in and just check it out. And then eventually we'll have another one down in Mount Greenwood as the kind of the next step. But we're in a good spot and growing organization and trying to address as many needs as possible as quickly as possible.
Awesome. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Do you want to close with a prayer?
Yeah,
Matt,
I kind of like the one at the end of that you gave us. Can we read that one?
Yeah, go ahead, read it.
All right. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, you have called us to serve in positions of great responsibility. Help us to lead with wisdom, act with integrity, and speak with kindness. Remove any blindness in our hearts so that we may guide others in truth. May our work reflect your justice and mercy. Amen. In the name of the Father,
Amen.
Son, Holy Spirit.
All right. Well, that concludes episode 4. It was an action-packed episode, as promised. All the people were like, "Where's episode 4 from last week?" I said, "Let me tell you, you're going to have to wait a little bit, but it's going to be something special." And
Patience.
that's right. It's all because of Brendan and Matt. It has nothing to do with the other 3 of us because,
For
well,
sure.
it just doesn't. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank-
Um,
Honored,
Thank you, gentlemen.
guys. Love what you're doing, and thanks again for having us.
thank you.
Thank you so much for letting us be
All
part
right.
of this. Thank you.
Perfect.
God bless, guys.